Shalom and welcome back to the Rashi Nosh. I'm Pastor Matt.
And I'm Kara.
It's good to be back with you this week, and we are quickly approaching the end of this Torah cycle, if you can believe it. Very soon we will roll the scroll all the way back to Genesis, and it will be good to be with you in the next Torah cycle next year for 5786. Where does the time go? I think it gets faster as we get older.
Yeah.
So it's been wonderful to be with you this year in this particular Rashi discussion, Torah commentary. And this week we are in the Torah portion called Tavo, and we're at a heading on page 172 called Taking Ownership. Now, before we dive into the reading and the discussion question, if you've not done so already, please subscribe to this channel, like and comment on this video, and share it on your social media platforms. So it says here, people sometimes caution against buying a pre-owned car that was owned by a rental company, since many drivers have treated the rented car with less care than their personal cars. A verse from the Parasha alludes to this phenomenon of people treating something, be it an object, a problem, or a heritage, differently when they regard it as their own. Yet, to this day, the Lord has not given you a mind to understand, or eyes to see, or ears to hear. This is Deuteronomy 29:3. Now, Rashi explains that what was significant about the phrase this day. To this day, on the very day when Moses gave the Torah scroll to the sons of Levi, his tribe, as the verse says, Deuteronomy 31:9, and gave it to the priests, sons of Levi. All Israel came before Moses and said to him, "Our master Moses, we also stood at Mount Sinai and accepted the Torah as it was also given to us. Why then are you giving the members of your tribe control over it, so they may tell us someday in the future, it was not given to you, it was given only to us?" Moses rejoiced over this matter, and it was on account of this that he said to them, "Today you have become the people of the Lord your God," meaning, today I understand that you cleave to and desire the omnipresent. Rashi explains that Moses rejoiced when the Israelites challenged his giving the Torah scroll to his own tribesmen, because it indicated to the Israelites that they regarded the Torah as their own. It was in the days of Moses, the Torah remains, or as it was in the days of Moses, the Torah remains today, the legacy of both the Jewish nation and each individual Jew. So if we have possession of something, if we have ownership of something, if we regard something to be ours or under our care, do we treat it differently? That is the true question that is being posed here. And I think I've seen evidence of that. In fact, I think in congregational work, a lot of times when we will ask for perhaps donations or something for maybe a building project or a remodel or something to spruce up the property of the congregation, a lot of times we do that because if someone has a bit of buy-in, if someone is contributing money, they feel a sense of ownership and they treat something better. And I think not only do people treat something better if they regard it as their own, I think people treat something better if it's not free.
True.
I think sometimes we have even with young people, even with teenagers, we've had the opportunity to give someone something or to have them pay for it, even if it's at a drastically reduced price. Because if they've got to pay something, then they treat it better somehow, if that makes sense. So our question that we want to look at is, do you tend to treat items on loan to you, rental cars, library books, a friend's article of clothing, etc., with less care, the same care, or more care than if you owned the item? Or does the care vary depending on the circumstances? Or maybe we could even say depending on the value of the item. What accounts for your chosen level of care?
Well, I was going to say, after your opening thing, I was going to say I almost feel the opposite way. I almost, obviously in the situation you gave the example for, people do with they have the buy-in, they treat it more as if they own it. But I tend to, and I see a lot times there, you will treat other people's things more carefully than your
Yes.
own. If I borrow something, I'm going to make sure that it is taken care of. I'm going to wash it, or I'm going to do whatever before I return it. If I borrow a car, I'm going to not return it unless I've vacuumed it out and made sure I'm not going to carelessly open a door or anything. I'm going to be a little bit more careful when it's someone else's or something that's borrowed versus if it was mine, because I see it every day and I use it every day. I kind of get a little lazy about things, or I'm not as sensitive to things. And so I tend to feel like in my life or certain aspects of it, I feel like I'm the opposite. Like I definitely feel like other people's things I'm more careful of than my own, which obviously isn't always good for every situation. Obviously, depending on the item, for just small things, like they said, books or article of clothing or cars, obviously I tend to do that. Obviously, with my own family or things that I own that are more valuable, obviously I take them, I value them more, and I'm very careful with those. But some of the smaller things in life, I tend to be the opposite, where I take care of other people's stuff better than my own.
I think that's probably true for a lot of us. That's certainly true with me. In fact, there are some times where people will want to lend me a book, and I purposely will say, let me just take a picture of it. And if you really recommend it, I will buy this book and have it in my library. And then that way I'm not responsible for if
Not
the book
losing
gets
it.
damaged or lost or mistreated in some way. I want to make sure that we're honoring people. I think a wonderful example for us recently was when we were in Colorado at Shuvu camp. We had to rent a vehicle, and we were in the mountains, and so it was very dry and very dusty, and so the outside of the vehicle got very dusty. And I said to you, we can't take it back to the rental car place like this. It's just so covered in dust. And even though it's their job to wash the car when it comes back, I said, I can't in good conscience take it. We have to have this car washed before we take it back. And I'm glad we did that. But because it was someone else's vehicle, I tend to be like you. I'm the exact opposite, where I think sometimes if people are in a hotel room or in a rented vehicle or a place that's not their own, since it's not their job, so to say, to clean it up or do whatever, they may be more flippant with it. And I tend to be the opposite. If I'm in someone else's space or borrowing a vehicle or renting a vehicle, I tend to treat it really, really nicely. And in fact, I felt a little bad when I got back from there to get into my own vehicle. I thought, oh, it's been a while since I've had this car washed, because you're at home in your own vehicle, and you let stuff slide sometimes. So I
Yeah, you get
totally
used to it.
I
Yeah.
totally understand that. Now, I think the opposite can be true in certain people's circumstances, and maybe we're not like everybody else. But I love this idea of, if you've got a bit of ownership in something that is valuable and you realize it's valuable, you do tend to take care of it.
Protect it. Yeah.
Whether it's certain books that we have, or musical instruments, or different things that we have that need special care and a concern about them. I think you do take a bit of pride in saying, no, this is my thing that I worked hard to get, or that I've maybe always wanted this volume of this book, or
Hmm.
this guitar, or something, and so then you really do, you say, no, I need to take pride in how I treat this. So I totally get that. So I love how even just the Torah itself, if we take ownership of it, these instructions and commands that God gives us, it's important that we treat them with respect.
Yeah, because it's easy to not take ownership and then just kind of be about, oh, it's just God's word. It's no big deal.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's in our day, if we don't look at it the right way, it just becomes just words. You know what I mean? And that's scary.
It is. Well, that's what a number of weeks ago when we were in Parashat Ekev, where that means the heel, the commandments that we step on, that we don't. don't think twice about. It's so important for us to remember the value that we have. Think about people in other parts of the world that don't have access to the written word of God, or think about how the Jewish people had to survive sometimes for generations without access to a Torah scroll, and they just had to tell the stories and the lessons of the Bible to their children and their grandchildren just from memory. We're so privileged to not only able to have access to the Bible, but access online to many free resources or access to wonderful books like these that we've been going through this Torah cycle. We're so rich when it comes to opportunity to study. So we need to not take that for granted.
Yeah.
So what do you treat with special respect? Maybe something that you have that is something of value, or maybe something that you've borrowed. Do you expect when you lend to someone one of your possessions, do you expect a certain level of treatment, a certain level of care from them? I think it's an interesting discussion that we can have. Thank you once again for joining us for this week's Rashi Nosh. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and we hope this has been thought-provoking and engaging for you. Once again, share this so that as many people as possible can be blessed by it. Thank you once again for joining us. We will see you next week. Shalom.